Dear God, thank you for this morning and for waking up us. I would like to ask you to be your spirit in the midst of us. I ask you to guide our minds, for we understand the present truth, and that we can be changed and for better, and that we can be changed by the truth. We can be transformed by it. I ask you to be with us now. In Jesus' name, amen.
I got a few questions from someone in here. I don't think they mind if I name their name, but I'm going to use those questions as a point of reference to start with. And I left my glasses at home, so using Kathy's glasses is difficult for me. But one of the questions was, and the person that sent it in, they can remind me of the questions if I forget some of them. But when we're dealing with this letter from Africa, this email from Africa, that among other things is suggesting that Pompey, Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, and Tiberius are the last, that they're parallels to the 4 Persian kings in the first 4 verses of Daniel 11. Questions in that regard. One of them is the quote on Daniel 11, where Sister White quotes verses 30 to 36 and says, scenes similar to those described in these words shall take place. And the question was, what's the justification for saying that other verses in Daniel 11, other than verses 30 to 36, are repeated? And I would point you to that quote that I just referenced. It begins by saying, troublous times are before us. Much of the history that's taken place in fulfillment of Daniel 11 will be repeated. So it doesn't just limit verses 30 to 36. It says much of the history that's taken place in fulfillment of Daniel 11 will be repeated. And then after that, she quotes verses 30 to 36. Second question there was, and maybe it's a misunderstanding on the questioner's part, what justification do we have for suggesting that pagan Rome would typify the United States? And to me, that's a well-established point. If the person was thinking that we were saying Rome as in the papacy, then that might have been just a misunderstanding on their part. We're saying that pagan Rome typifies the United States on lots of lines. Pagan Rome is the power that placed the papacy on the throne of the earth. The United States is the power that's going to place the papacy on the throne of the earth. You can show the activity of Clovis is typifying the activity of Ronald Reagan in verse 40. There are just several lines that are established for a long period of time that pagan Rome is, pardon me?
Obviously, they both started as republics.
Yeah, it's even the world, when they're comparing the activities since 9/11, they compare us back to Imperial Rome.
And the United States is referred to as Rome by Islam.
Yeah.
And they're not meaning Papal Rome?
No,
They're meaning,
they mean states.
no, but I mean when they're saying the United States is Rome.
They're talking about the United States being Rome.
Okay, but what Rome are they
But they're
saying is,
referring to ancient Rome.
okay, pagan Rome?
Yeah,
Not Papal Rome.
not Papal Rome, no. I don't even think they think of Papal Rome.
But they
as
should,
Papal
right?
Rome.
That's what the Crusades was all about.
Yeah, but that's not who they see the United States as pagan Rome.
Okay, but anyway, that's that logic. If you're not familiar with that, someone that sent me an email, okay, I'm answering the questions. ISIS refers to the United States as Rome. Okay. Any other thoughts along that line? What were the other questions?
Rome has 2 legs as the medium version.
Rome has 2 legs as the Medes and Persians.
Has the 2 arms.
Has the 2 arms. That's a comment. He's arguing that the 2 legs of pagan Rome. And you're prepared to defend that?
Yeah, we have another reason. It's because the East Rome it goes for 1,000 years more than the East. Yeah.
Okay, and why is that a witness?
For me, this is just like the hem, that the horn that came later is higher than the one that came first. I don't know if you can.
Okay, where did the legs start?
No, I'm not talking about legs. I'm just talking about that it's just like the Persia came later and stay higher than the Medo.
You're getting problems with that.
Okay.
I think Tyler's going to start telling you the problems.
If you look in the chart behind you, or Daniel, if you look at the chart, the pioneers do not identify those legs as two separate powers, all pagan Rome. The legs have nothing to do with papal Rome.
They argue against it. They argue against those two long legs representing two phases of pagan Rome.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't know it.
Two phases of pagan.
What, they argue against that concept.
But they're pagan Rome.
Yeah, they'll say it's pagan Rome, but they argue against the two legs having any prophetic significance of two aspects of Rome.
No,
But
but I'm talking that they are talking about East and West Rome.
Yes, no, and that's the concept they talk against.
Oh, okay.
They say the legs can't start east and west, because if they did, then east and west Rome would have to begin at the same time.
Okay.
So you go back to the waist where you're gonna get into the legs, and you'd have to see east and west Rome from the beginning, because the legs are split from the beginning.
That's why I said, where do they start?
Yep.
They start the same place.
There is a quote, I'm not sure, I think it's in Prophetic keys, that I read, somewhere else of course, but it says that every kingdom, every raising and decreasing of every kingdom parallels itself. So we can parallel
The rise and fall of every kingdom parallels.
another, all the other
Oh,
kingdoms.
yeah.
So we can, I mean, of course there's, so if in the end we parallel everything like this, it's not gonna be a weird thing.
No. No other comments? Is there any other questions about this stuff before we return to, yes?
So I had two other questions.
Two other questions. I was trying to remember those other questions. They're not popping in my brain.
When using the information from 9/11, Midnight Cry, Midnight to Sunday Law,
Oh yeah, that I didn't understand.
Can you say it again?
When taking a line and placing it from 9/11 to the Sunday Law,
are we pulling back to apply it from 1989 to the close of probation?
that's the part I didn't understand.
Which is,
Are we, or is the question, do we also?
yes. Do we also, should we be applying it also that way?
Okay, now do you understand the question? Okay, it might be easier to illustrate it. She's saying when we take a line of prophecy and we say that these are the waymarks in it that we're looking at, do we automatically, every time, she doesn't say it this way, take this same history and expand it out and say this is 1989, Sunday Law, close of probation, right? Do we always do that? Is that something that gets done ever? Or should we be?
Yeah, based on fractals.
What are you saying? This is
Now I have a question. Sorry.
this is explain yourself. We'll try to answer.
Based on fractals,
Based on fractals.
we're looking at 9/11 to Sunday Law. But
Give me an example of that.
whole, I wish I had my chart. So an example of that would be, I was going to say the time of the end, the time of Christ, but, well, Michael said Ezra 7:9, but we're looking at like the 1, 2, 3 is pretty much, I guess, what I'm looking at. So 1989, the end being 1, Sunday Law being 2, close of probation being 3. And
1989 is the arrival of the first,
First angel,
empowerment of the first.
Yeah.
In our history, second arrives here, second empowered, third arrives here, third empowered. So that's the 1, 2, 3 you're talking about. So what are you asking about?
So looking at 1 being 1989, 2 being Sunday law, and 3 being close of probation, as we did before, and 9/11, Midnight Cry, and Sunday law being a fractal of that, are we looking for those same waymark or applications to be in the larger fractal?
Okay. Everyone understand her
larger
question?
scale?
Anyone understand her question, her comment? So you can restate it for me, because I didn't quite follow it. But
The way that we've seen initially when we were doing the reform lines way back, you would know, but we had it that it would be the second step is the Sunday law and the third step is the close of probation. I don't remember it ever being the first step was 1989, but nevertheless the second step was the Sunday law and the third step was the close of probation. And we gave these arguments about the Sunday law because that's you say the second angel's message is not yet met, it's complete fulfillment, and we know that it's really fulfilled at the Sunday law. So anyways, so that on that big scale, that's the primary view or the big view, and then we fractaled it down, and now we really just talked about 9/11 to the Sunday law, mostly. So do these things that we're saying about 9/11 to the Sunday law still apply at the bigger level?
is that your question? Yeah. Yeah, well, they have to, or they're not fractals, right? If the long view has all these characteristics and you shrink it down and it fits in the smaller view but it possesses all those characteristics, that's what a fractal is. But what we don't do, we don't spend time on the big ones because we're forced by context to look at the little ones at this time.
Yeah,
Theodore.
so I've understood it that way the whole time, that we still look at the big picture. But now what we're looking at is the different groups of people. So the Sunday law one came when we started seeing the close of probation for Adventists. Right, is that correct? And then we started to see that even within Adventism, there were the priests, the Levites, and then we understood the combining of the two sticks, the empowered workers, all these different things. And then we started dealing with the midnight and the midnight cry. And so we keep zooming down to where we are. See, before we were looking at Google Earth, we were seeing the whole Earth. And then we kept zooming in, but instead of just seeing, we see the same thing, the whole world. We see it all acting out on a smaller scale. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. And that's answering that thought?
My question was more if we do or we should do that, especially when we're looking at the understanding we looked at on Thursday, expanding it bigger. I understand that.
What did we look at Thursday that you're talking about? I see your hand, Michael.
The 4 kings, for example.
The pagan kings?
Yeah, the pagan kings or the Roman king, or Caesars. Right,
The
we're
Caesars.
looking at this history happening at that time. But in my mind, seeing it happening at that time means that it won't be happening in the same way in another time.
What history are the Caesars? What is the history of the Caesars that you're referring to? I mean, what structure do you see in that we studied on Thursday?
The 4 Caesars, the raiser of taxes, and the last one, connecting that with Daniel 11.
Okay, the fourth one would be, and what takes place in his history? The cross. Okay, it's in the 4 Persian kings in verses 1 through 4 of Daniel 11. We're understanding that the last king has parallel kingdoms, right? That word dominion in verse 4, parallel kingdom. It's providing an argument that the last president of the United States is the president of the United States and also the president or whatever of the United Nations. Everyone on following that? What's one of the significant things in Tiberius? Is that who it is?
Yeah.
Tiberius's life, in his reign. Pardon me?
He was vile.
He was a vile guy, but he did attempt to manage the Roman Empire until when? Until 26, what's this, AD. Okay, he's managing, he's the king, he's the emperor that's managing the kingdom at 26 AD. What's he do in 26 AD? He moves to Capri, some island named Capri, and he parties until he dies. Okay, so he has two lives going. He's got he as a Roman emperor, he rules Rome for a while, and then the historians talk about at this point here, he goes and parties down. That's all he does on this island. That's the main reason they'll call him a vile king, is what went on when he was on this island, abdicating essentially his. So you can see two periods in his emperorship that parallel the two periods of this fourth richer king. But when they're talking from after 26 onward, what happens in 27? Christ is here, he's still the emperor all the way through the death of Christ and on. What's he doing during that history? He's drunk. They note he's drunk from morning to night. He's drunk. This is the king that's drunk with the wine of Babylon. Okay, so you've got two histories that correspond to two parallel histories. He's a vile guy. And it says that he's deceitful. Right? Yes? What does the United States do from this point on? They deceive the world. Okay. So who's the king before this guy? Augustus. And what is he? He's a tax guy. Who's the one before him?
Julius Caesar.
And who's before him?
Pompey.
When Uriah Smith speaks about these two guys, what did they both have in common? What job assignment did they both have? What was the thing that Pompey? Why does Pompey get drawn into prophetic history?
Well, he besieges Jerusalem.
He what?
He does a siege of Jerusalem.
He does the siege of Jerusalem. So you got that in there, but
They're not ruling together.
Co-ruling.
Isn't there some
Triumvirate.
Yeah,
They're in the first
yeah, there's
one.
three of them.
okay, they form a threefold union. They form a threefold union between
Mark Antony's with the Gus.
Lepidus.
There's a
Yeah.
third guy.
Yeah, Lepidus, and Pompey, and Julius Caesar. Or Lepidus, or however you
They're all
spell it.
consuls.
Pompey, Mark Antony.
No, that's the second triumvirate. There's two. The first one was Julius Caesar with Pompey and another guy.
There's another one here.
Yeah, there's another one.
Yeah.
Because those three formed a
Okay, that's cool, but that's not what I'm getting at. What is it that both of these guys do? Why does Pompey come into history? What's going on in Egypt?
Egypt. Yeah.
rebellion.
They were.
And he goes down.
Is it a rebellion?
Isn't there?
It's a threat. I mean, it can call it a rebellion, but why does it get drawn into Egypt in the first place? No one went and looked at Uriah Smith, did they? Okay, he gets drawn in because whatever you call him, the Pharaoh of Egypt dies. And Cleopatra and her brother are little kids. And there's about 3 powers that are coming to attack them. And one of the powers forms a dual alliance, 2 powers, and they said, we'll take half of Egypt, I'll take half of Egypt, you take the other half of Egypt. And Pompey comes in by the Romans, he's put to do what? To protect. Julius Caesar is going to protect too. When he gets rid of Pompey, he takes up the job of the protector of Cleopatra and her brother, of a man and a woman. Yeah, there's a relationship there that these guys are to protect.
Marcus Crassus, yeah, is the third one for that first. Crassus.
Okay, so you got a threefold union,
And then it's not
but that's not what I'm getting at. All of these guys are dictators, right? The second, third, and fourth, they all end up being dictators. Pompey never reaches that height. So you've got a 1-3, where with the Persian kings you got a 3-1. But here, their job, what they're doing here, is to preserve the relationship of church and state, represented by Cleopatra and her brother, a boy and a girl. They're to protect church and state. In this kingdom, this is the glory of the kingdom. The glory of the kingdom's still in place. What's the glory of the kingdom of the United States? Constitution. It's going to be gone in this kingdom, because he's not going to have the honor. So it's there. I don't know what the threefold unions here are. What would the threefold unions here be?
I think when you zoom, a perfect example of the fractal within that structure, if you go into the details of that history, you're no longer looking at it as 4 kings. You're going to be looking at the different characteristics. Like Cleopatra, she's all over in there doing all kinds of stuff, controlling kings, and she controls Julius, she controls Mark Antony. She's really the power that's controlling. So when you dig into that history, it's again an example.
Is she the power that's controlling, or she's the power that's seducing?
Seducing, which is controlling.
Is it? Okay, so if we have Salome and Herodias, which is the power that's seducing and the power that's controlling? Salome is seducing, Herodias is controlling. So it might make a difference.
Protestants that are controlling the government and through a form of seduction. Because in this story, there isn't another power that's behind the scenes. She's the power. She's the main.
Who?
The Cleopatra. When she goes in and she seduces.
Okay, Cleopatra's here,
Yeah, all the way through.
and her brother, and Rome. Right? Rome's the protector. So who would Rome be in the relationship? Who would the brother be? It's going to be state, right? She's going to be church. Who's he going to be?
The government.
Greece.
This is the dragon. This is the beast. Cleopatra has to be the false prophet.
In this instance, but if you go down to the history, not at number 2 where Julius is, she seduces him and she gets rolled out of this rug and
Yep.
she seduces him, and then later when she's with Mark Antony, and this is what I'm talking about, like as you go down the line, there's different things being emphasized. Now she's a full-grown woman and she is fully controlling Mark Antony. I mean, everything he does is with his tongue out of his mouth, and he's just drooling over her, and she's controlling his actions. So she may be the false prophet.
So where are we putting Mark Antony in history? Right in here?
He's right at the 3, with the 3.
Right at the 3, you're
At
saying?
the 3, Augustus, Mark Antony, and Lepidus are forming the second triumvirate in that history until Mark Antony dies.
So there's not one here.
There is one there too. That's Pompey, Julius, and Crassus. Not at Pompeii back there. It's right there.
Okay,
2
here.
and 3 are where you see your 2 triumvirates.
You have threefold unions.
Yeah.
Cleopatra's here with her brother.
And she's
Pompey's protecting him. Cleopatra's here with Julius Caesar. And he's coming in to settle things. Julius Caesar is. And she doesn't think that Julius Caesar is going to allow her to make her case. So she comes in wrapped up in this rug. And she seduces him. Right?
Yeah.
So the threefold union here is what? Who is it?
Oh, it's Julius Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey.
Okay, so it's different than his relationship with Cleopatra.
Yeah. And this is my point. This example of fractals, because you have, number 1, you have the structure of 4 kings, and that structure doesn't change. But when you zoom in, you have this structure, you have this threefold union, and then at another level, his experience with Cleopatra is illustrating again the combination of church and state, where the church is in control of the relationship. So you have multiple levels of thought being brought out there.
So, speaking to at least what I was reading between the lines in her email, Sister Michelle's, but I'm not sure that she's going to say what I'm saying. Do we have justification for taking these these Caesars and lining them up with the 4 Persian kings? What's your justification for taking the Caesars?
The kings. I mean,
Yeah, the kings. Well, for me, the point of reference is the cross. This king here is the king that's active during the cross, and the cross is supposed to be the center of everything that we understand. And we understand on tons of witnesses that the cross is the Sunday law, so this Tiberius is the President of the United States at the Sunday law. Wrong?
In Acts 5,
Acts 5.
37 and 36 is Gamaliel preaching, talking,
Go ahead.
advising, and it says that he marks Judas of Galilee, which is a false Messiah, in the days of taxing. So, I mean, in the days of taxing, which is known in history as the same time as Daniel
Read it.
11.
Read it to us. Acts what?
5. So Acts 5, 5:36 to 38. And said unto them, Ye men of Israel, take heed to yourselves what ye intend to do as touching these men. For before these days rose up Judas, boasting himself to be somebody, to whom a number of men, about 400, joined themselves, was slain, and all as many as obeyed him. So Judas, I don't know if I put in Julius or Pompey, but he's before Judas. And then after this man rose up Judas of Galilee in the days of taxing, and drew away much people after him. He also perished, and all, even as many as obeyed him, were dispersed. And now I say unto you, refrain from these men, and let them alone, for if this counsel of this work be of men, it will come to naught.
So what's your point?
So I'm pointing that Gamaliel is talking about rebellious people.
False prophets.
Yeah, but she's calling the apostles, which is in the time age of the fourth king, emperor. And then he talks about Judas of Galilee, which is this, it's in the time, historically the time of this third king, and he's also connecting with tax raising.
Okay.
And then he talks about Judas, which comes before him. But I couldn't mark him. There's some problems in history about it. So I'm saying that for me, this is the second witness to a tax raiser to
Put it here.
put it here. Yeah, and the apostles, you put it there. And then you have Judas here. Different Judas, but a Judas as well. Who dies, who perish.
Okay, so that's unresolved.
You're talking about if you can apply the kings of Rome there. If you understand by Daniel that the message that we're gonna take to the Belshazzar or Nebuchadnezzar is to give a message for the church and to the United States, can it be a witness to say that the king of Babylon can be represented also by the United States as the king of Rome can be represented?
I don't know. Pagan Rome, you can show, does the work of the United States. It's the active agent to putting the papacy on the throne of the earth. Is there an illustration of Babylon putting Babylon on the throne?
This is getting back to, I think, I'm going to try to see if this is what Michelle's asking, but her question's dealing with structure, and when we're dealing with the smaller stuff, are we justified in taking what we understand about the smaller details and putting it on a bigger scale? And if I understand right. So one of the things that I've come to understand is that with the binding off, we eventually got to the point where we said no more. We're not gonna keep zooming in and zooming in and zooming in like the mirrors that you stick, face to face, because it doesn't bear any fruit. It just gets confusing and muddled. So at one point we finally were able to get enough prophetic arguments together to say that it actually stops in this level and it doesn't just keep going forever and ever and ever. And I think it's the same in reverse. When you're taking the lessons that are given in the binding off, or the lessons that are given from 9/11 to the Sunday law, or from 9/11 to the close of probation, you're not taking absolutely everything and just applying it all like a blanket statement. I think that that there's a big scale representation that's understood, and it's vaguer, and then you get more specific and it has more detail, but all that detail doesn't apply on every level, I don't think. Like if you're looking at the plan of salvation, you have a 3-step testing process from the fall of Adam until the close of human probation. And there's a lot of things going on there, but there's Christ's work in the sanctuary that's being emphasized. But all of the detail that comes with Christ's work in the sanctuary when you get into the most holy place and you zoom in from 9/11 to the Sunday law isn't seen from the fall of man until the close of probation. It's on a bigger level, there's less detail. And as you zoom in, there's more specifics. I don't know if that answers what you're saying, but you don't just want to take everything and say, well, we see it from 9/11 to the midnight cry, therefore let's apply it everywhere we look at in 3 steps.
This is a common discussion that we've had.
Yeah.
Not necessarily directly the same words, but how to handle fractals. You had another question?
But I
No.
understand it.
Michelle?
Yeah. But it was. Do
Okay.
you want me to ask it?
I don't know. I want to move. We don't have to if it doesn't fit in. I don't remember what it was. What I want to suggest is that there is a justification for putting these 4 Roman emperor Caesars lining up with the 4 Persian kings, because it's in the very same prophecy. It's the context is allowing you to consider it that way. So if this Pompey, Julius, Augustus, I don't know if I'm spelling these right, but they would be these 4 Persian kings. Here's the problem I have. We've already seen 4 kings before. Okay, we've seen as a symbol. What are 4 kings that we've seen as a symbol? So is Manasseh going to line up here?
No,
No. Why not?
because what you're driving, where you're going, not where you're going, but if this is Bush, Clinton, that representation, we know that, these presidents weren't ruling at those specific times. So it can't.
Everyone seeing that?
Unless my historical reference off the top of my head is that they were. But I don't know.
Okay,
Maybe.
this is Manasseh. This is Ammon, is it? Josiah. Kim.
It's about Jehoahaz
In between.
the 3-month reign.
Has right there. And
Yeah, you can't do it then.
and Zedekiah. Does everyone know what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
What are the 4 kings that we derive from here? There's 7 kings, right?
Right.
Well, we take this one and these last 3.
Yeah.
We're taking the 1, 5, 6, 7. Just at the math, it seems wrong, right?
And it's a progressive destruction of 4, and those are the 4 that are marked.
Okay. There was a hand back there.
I'm just saying that for me it's different because that's dealing with the internal structure, and that the other kings on the outside are doing with the external structure, so I try to keep this separate in my mind.
Okay, what about Cyrus?
The different lessons, same line, different.
How do you spell Cambyses? Is that how you spell is that an E?
It's YSES.
false Smyrtus. And this would be is that acceptable?
Restoration of the temple.
Pardon me?
The restoration of the temple, the rise.
Yeah, temples.
Yeah.
But would these four kings, which are part of the seven thunders,
Why these four?
What he's just doing.
why these four? Because what I'm saying is it's hard for me to see how the first king Manasseh and the last of the seven kings, Jehoiakim, and Zedekiah, can be a linear four, like these
Okay.
are. Okay, plus you have the added argument that this is that we're seeing this being specifically directed at the leadership of the United States, so it breaks it down. But this is from the seven thunders, but it's the first four, and in the churches, seals, and trumpets, and other places, you see a 4-3 combination, which does isolate the first four prophetically. So what would happen if we put, what does this guy do? What's his argument?
He's the tax guy. Right?
He's the tax guy. Right? He's the one that says, if you allow the Jews to do this, build this, restore this, they're not going to pay you taxes.
Doesn't that break down what we've been saying a little bit about that guy being at, this false Smyrnus being at midnight because he's representing the sedition, the taxation issue that's going to rise? And if I'm following the logic of what you're saying, this third guy would be President Obama. So the suggestion would be that midnight is before Obama leaves office. Would be the suggestion. I don't know if you're suggesting that.
That I've thought about that, unless what Obama is noted for is the development of the Internal Revenue Service to the point that it's at today. Okay, for me, I don't know how many of you watched it, but when they first started going after the IRS publicly about a year ago, the head of the IRS was a woman. And she came into Congress to be interviewed, and she basically said, forget you. She lied to them. She didn't interact with the Congress, and I think she resigned and stepped aside, but she got no punishment whatsoever. They're dealing with the new head of the IRS now, and he's starting to get in trouble. But this woman got off. I mean, they didn't do anything to her. Does anyone remember what I'm talking about? No one's been paying attention to that? Go back and look at it. They're having a big scandal in the IRS now because they have discovered since that first woman that she was flat out lying, that they had a whole list of conservative 501c3s that they were going after, and they did not go after any liberal ones. And when they brought her in, she basically snowballed her whole story, and she was real arrogant about it, and they still talk about it. My point is, the only reason, humanly, the only reason I can think that she could be arrogant to those people is because she knew she wasn't going to get in trouble, because she knew she had enough dirt on Republicans and Democrats that neither party is going to do anything to the Internal Revenue Service. They're both going to use it as their tool. So they're not going to throw it out just because there's a Democratic administration in. They want it in place in case they get in as Republicans, because they're going to use it as a tool. So my point is, we've had revealed in history as American citizens that the tax arm of the United States has been corrupted, and that was the beginning of the United States. The issue was over corrupt taxation. Jesus illustrates the end from the beginning, and the United States is a subject of Bible prophecy. So in this history, it may be that it has come to light that the taxation tool that will be used in this history is what is finally established, put in place. But that's your argument is what I'm bringing up. It's what's our justification for bringing these four kings together. And don't they start defining that we're not supposed to bring them together if they start contradicting each other? So which 4 kings can you bring?
I don't know why we're putting Cyrus to Darius as the 4 kings. Shouldn't Xerxes the Great be the 4th? Up on the board we have Cyrus, Cambyses, Phalsamerus, Darius. The 4th should be Xerxes, unless I'm misunderstanding.
No, you're understanding. What are you saying? I know what you're saying.
No, I know. I'm saying that you have Darius.
I'm taking this just out of the 7 thunders, how we would take the 4 Persian kings in the story of Esther. And you're trying to go to Daniel 11 verses 1 through 4.
Oh, okay. I see.
So, do you see the distinction that he's making? Yes, no? So what's the problem with that?
But the Alexander the Great, he doesn't parallel with the five king. That should be.
Here you got Xerxes the Great,
Yeah.
and then Alexander the Great.
Isn't it? I thought it was like this.
Xerxes is looking at
I don't understand.
the decrees.
He's saying that where you were referring to Daniel 11, 1 through 4, that the 4th king you're saying is Xerxes is not followed by another Persian king, he's followed by Alexander the Great.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
No, he's not saying you have a problem with it. He's saying that the sequence there is not the same sequence as the 7 thunders, as the Persian kings.
So you're intentionally grabbing the first 4 there just to see how they line up.
I'm intentionally talking about where we have symbols of 4 other kings, whether it's Manasseh, Jehoiakim, Chin, Zedekiah, which is the number 4 that we use, and saying, can we bring those in on these 4 Persian and Roman kings in Daniel 11? It doesn't seem like we can, but what about the other variation of 4 kings from the 7 thunders, the first 4, knowing that 7 has been split prophetically 4-3.
What about the 4 horns that come out of the 1 horn?
What about the 4 horns that come out of the 1 horn? That's beyond my...
When you first ask the question,
Pardon me?
when you first ask the question, the main kingdoms that pop up on my head were the 4 kingdoms of Daniel. If you ask me 4 kings, yeah, that's the 4.
So that would be these?
If you ask me where are other 4 kings, my first answer will be this.
Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece,
And Rome.
and Rome.
The thing that just, in my mind, that breaks down point in some of these, at least the 7 Thunders one, kings, is because, again, once you get into our history, you find that these kings don't line up at 1989, 9/11, Midnight Cry. You know, it's a different level, because what we're saying is, we're saying the 4th king lines up to Midnight Cry and the Sunday Law, and maybe even midnight. We don't know when midnight is, but so it doesn't follow the same pattern. It's a sort of completely different beast of its own, to say this.
What is?
The Daniel 11, 1 through 4.
And 16.
Yeah.
I just want to correct something. That the first triumvirate happens back with Pompey, but Pompey and Julius Caesar Pompey's not ruling by himself. That they have this triumvirate. They come together with Crassus back in this history, and it's after Pompey's wife, which is Julius' sister, dies, and after Crassus dies, that Julius goes after Pompey in a civil war and chases him to Egypt, and that's where you see Julius. But my point is that they don't reign sequentially. Pompey has to be taken out of the picture, but Julius and him are reigning at the same time. They're just 2 military generals that are vying for the leadership position.
Yeah, I followed, I read that, but I don't know how to
I'm saying
clearly put it out.
If they're not sequential, do we have justification still to see that this is the 4 kings that are going to parallel Daniel 1 through 4.
Are they?
When Pompey, Julius, Augustus, Tiberius aren't sequential. Julius, Augustus, and Tiberius are sequential, but Pompey and Julius are kind of like mixed together there.
Does Pompey die before Julius?
Yeah. Yeah, he has to take him out of the way.
Are they not?
There's a type of sequence that happens. Yeah, there is an overlapping.
Okay, going back to Pompey, to what Theodore first said, did you catch what Theodore first said about Pompey? What happened in the history of Pompey?
Siege of Jerusalem.
So, siege of Jerusalem,
63 AD.
which is what? What would that be? The siege of Jerusalem in 63.
That's Daniel 11,
No, but that's
16.
I didn't understand. Isn't Tiberius in the time of Christ?
Consume the glories.
Yes.
Yeah, this is the different siege. This is the first siege.
Oh.
63.
This is when
63
Rome takes
ABC.
BC.
BC.
Oh, did I say 80?
BC.
Oh.
Yeah, BC.
So they had
Never mind. BC.
they had at BC and AD 66 AD. They're the same day.
Yeah, this is in this history you have typified the Sunday law.
Yes, this is when Rome actually takes control of Jerusalem.
Yeah, this is when the second horn of pagan Rome is conquered. It has to conquer 3 horns to take control of the world. First Syria, then it'll stand in the glorious land, and then it's going to take Egypt. But in this history, Pompey wipes out Jerusalem and the temple. Okay, so what is that prophetically? Pardon me?
Time of the end, the first. That's Daniel 11:40.
It's Daniel 11:40. I'd say it's a Sunday law. Destruction of Jerusalem is a symbol of Sunday law.
Isn't the first?
You could argue that the end of the destruction of Jerusalem is the time of the end, because in Revelation 11 it says they shall trample underfoot the holy city for 1260 years. So the destruction of Jerusalem in that line, those 1260 years, has been typified by the 1260 days that it's destroyed from AD 66 to AD 70. You can argue that the very end of the destruction of Jerusalem would be the time of the end, because that would be 1798. But at the first level, it's typifying the Sunday law.
Maybe I didn't listen rightly what Michael said. 66 BC.
No,
63.
63. Okay. But I know, well, isn't the first of the 3 enemies of that Rome needs to conquer, or is the last?
It's the second. The first is Syria in 65, I think, open for correction.
I think it's 65 too.
Glorious land,
And 31.
and then Egypt
31.
at the Battle of Actium. Those are the King of the South, the glorious land, and Egypt.
I thought it was the first one, and then I was marking it as Daniel 11:40.
No, it's second one. But is there a Sunday law in here typified? Yes. And a threefold union, Michael's saying.
The 63 BC, when you read Daniel 11:16, the way that I've understood it, it says that he, Rome, is going to stand in the glorious land. That's when he has the league with the Jews, and then, which by his hand shall be consumed. So I've understood that the league with the Jews is 1989, where he comes into the glorious land, and then when he consumes the glorious land, that's the Sunday law. So it's a progressive overflowing. And so you can see that progression with Syria too. At the Battle of Hidna, you have the king of the north, at least I understand it.
What, is that the pioneer understanding that in verse 16, when he stands in the glorious land, that's the league with the Jews?
I think that's what Uriah Smith says, because in verse 23 he says, now you have a repeat and enlarge, going back to the history of verse 16. And so in 23 you say, after the league made with him. If you go back, you say, what league? Well, he stands in the glorious land. He's making an alliance back in 158 or around that time. So,
He says 161.
well, the chart says 158.
Yeah, I'm just talking about Smith.
Yes, and he says 161. And there's 2 leagues apparently. But nevertheless, the point is you have a progressive conquering. He first comes into the glorious land, and then by his hand, the glorious land is consumed. So in 1989, you have an alliance that leads to the consumption of destruction of the glorious land.
Okay, I'm going to put 158 over here because it's on the chart, but Uriah Smith says 161. This is the league with the Jews. Why do we need to pay attention to this? And what Michael's saying is that this is beginning the progressive destruction that comes down here with the glorious land, and we know that in the time of Pompey you have a Sunday law because Jerusalem is destroyed by Pompey. So Michael's saying that this league of the Jews, if this is the Sunday law, that this is the time of the end. Okay? But what's the problem with this? There's no problem with that, but what do we also have to deal with? If we're going to understand that these are 4 presidents, then we maybe have to disregard the former understanding in the sense that we place the League of the Jews grammatically in a sequence here and not necessarily drop it back into history. Was that unclear? It seemed unclear to me. Okay, so that's your dilemma. In the correct pioneer understanding, when you get to verse 22, is it? With the 23, with the League of the Jews, they will teach, now it's dropping back into this history in verse 23, after verses 16 through 22 have taken you all the way through this history. Now it's going to drop back to the League. Okay? But I'm saying that the way it makes sense to me when I look at the characteristics of these kings here at the end of the world, that this League fits down here going this direction without going back as we did originally.
So one of the problems that I've had as I've tried to study this history is that the pioneers were trying to, and Miller specifically, he was just trying to say we got Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greece, and Rome, and there's this unbroken period. So you just go Babylon, Medo, Persian comes, Greece comes, and now Rome comes, and he used the League as the way to say now Rome comes into history because they have a league with the Jews. And so now he was counting the Roman kingdom from that time. But the siege that happens in 63 is really the first time that the Jews are dominated by the Romans. Before that, that league didn't make them in subjection to Rome. It was actually basically a treaty between 2 equal parties. And even in 129, Judea was completely independent from Rome or Greece, right? So there wasn't this just direct transition between these empires.
But the pioneers never claimed that they came in subjection at the League.
No, but they were still trying to mark, Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greece, and Rome. And in doing that, what we have the impression of is just that, Rome just started. That's the way most people just think of it. Rome now is come into history because they come into contact with God's people. But then we think that that means that they're in subjection to Rome. But they're not during that time, until 63.
Yeah.
And
they just made a deal with them.
Right. And so that history, to understand it is kind of what we're trying to do right now, is to understand that in more detail. And
was there a secret alliance in 158 between the United States and the Vatican? Did it bring the United States in subjection to the Vatican, or did it just bring them into an agreement?
Agreement. Not this.
He's not done.
Oh, sorry.
But
well, so this history, though, I see this history that happens in this transition parallel with what happens in the setting up of the papacy. And so eventually the papacy becomes the ruling power. I mean, but it happens because Rome always comes in by flatteries, right? It doesn't conquer like the other nations. Both pagan and papal Rome have that same attribute.
okay, but you're getting lots of balls in the air now. Why are you saying that
Well, I'm
the
just saying,
first claim that this is like how the papacy's empowered?
yeah, there's some similarities.
So you're saying from the League unto the Sunday law, This would be 538 when the papacy's empowered, and this would be what?
Yeah, well, that would be,
321?
Even be, yeah.
321.
Yeah. that
So
would
it's
be-
showing this is the beginning of the progressive history that leads to the
Yeah.
papacy taking control of the world here.
Right, and the same thing happens in that period.
Perhaps. I see the logic.
So I've been looking at it on a little bit broader level, in that we know three geographical locations that have to be conquered: Syria, the Glorious Land, Egypt, right?
Right.
So each one of these has a progression. When you conquer, when Rome conquers Syria, it starts at the Battle of Pydna. That's the pivot point that everybody marks in 168. But it really doesn't happen until 65 BC. And it's the same with the Glorious Land. They make a league through deception. This is part of the point Theodore's bringing out, is that they're not so upfront about what they really want to do. And maybe they don't know what they want to do in that history, but prophetically, they're not upfront about what they're accomplishing. So they start with a league and then they conquer. And it's the same thing with Egypt. In 47, after Pompey's destroyed, Julius Caesar makes an alliance and a relationship with Egypt, but Egypt is not subjugated to Rome. Even though Rome is, they're helping protect, they're helping to govern. They've even said that to Cleopatra and her brother that you guys have to be married. So they're even kind of forcefully making them, do this, but they're still giving them their own dominion and their own power. But it's in 31 when Egypt is now subjugated to Rome, and Rome has conquered all three geographical locations. My point is,
And who dies in 31 BC?
Mark Antony and Cleopatra,
Huh.
and then Augustus.
So at the Sunday law, the separation church and state, it's dead.
Yeah, but then the Republic is dead too. The Republic dies, and the Emperor becomes. The Republic dies in 31, and I think in 27 BC, Augustus becomes the first emperor. So, anyways, that's a different note. But the point is, you see a progressive conquering, and then I've paralleled these things to communism, the United States, and the world. So Syria is communism, the Glorious Lands, the United States, and Egypt is the world. And so you would take each of these and try to line them up with those histories.
Right.
How Rome is conquering these geographical locations.
Okay, so what have we established?
I don't
What's
know
the point?
if we've established
Tyler.
That was my question: is what does this do at all for our kings? It
Yeah.
seems like to really murky it more than anything.
Well, I don't know if it's murking it, but it's not. The point I wanted to make is if we're going to make the claim, if I'm going to make the claim, like I've done, that these four Caesars are lining up with the four Persian kings, where are you restricted to go get other four kings? Doesn't seem like you can do Manasseh, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah, because they're not sequential and it has those kind of problems. Maybe we can't do this either. So that would mean that the only two witnesses, if what we're saying, the only two witnesses would be found in Daniel 11, perhaps. Perhaps that's the only place we could do it, if we can do it at all.
There has to be a second witness to these kings somewhere. There just has to be, or else it's not
You're saying
biblical.
third witness, but you're saying second. You're wanting to say third, but you're saying second.
Where's the third?
Where's the first?
The first is these guys.
Oh, no, these guys.
It's Daniel 11. One is
You got your first witness is in the first four verses.
Yep.
These guys are the second witness.
Well, we're not totally sure yet if they're a second witness. Is what you're saying? Is they're
Okay,
we're not-
so what you're saying is that you need a third witness.
to establish the first two, I guess. Yeah.
You don't need a third, you do need a solid second.
A solid
Or
second.
three.
How
You need a solid,
is
yeah, you do.
You need a solid second, but our second is what Jeff is saying doesn't feel so solid.
But I'm thinking that the cross is pretty solid. The idea that the tax guy is right before the cross, pretty solid. Bronwyn,
The
Daniel.
name Pompey means 5. Julius means downy or hairy. Augustus means to increase. And Tiberius means of the Tiber River. So I see 5 with obviously the 5 wise and foolish. To increase is no problem because we have an ensign being lifted up. The other two I'm not sure about.
No.
It's just the overflowing scourge.
So who are these guys? This would be Clinton, right?
No. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Bush to Obama. Now, you're saying Pompey means 5.
5.
Why would there be, what's the association with 5 with Clinton?
The only thing I can think of is 5.
Pompey equals 5. Julius means what?
Julius means downy or hairy.
Well, a bush.
It is.
What's downy? Downy, did you say downy?
Downy or hairy.
What's downy?
Downy beard or hairy. Downy is
Beard.
like a soft hair. It's downy.
Down on a bird.
Like the bush.
It says downy beard specifically.
Bird has down.
Hairy beard, hairy, okay, you guys all know, downy and hairy. Augustus means what?
To increase.
Which of course has to do with taxes, increased taxes.
Increase? Oh, so that would correspond.
What does Obama mean?
Question, I'll look it up.
I don't know.
And of the Tiber. 'cause
Of the
it's
Tiber, where's the Tiber
in
found?
Italy, it's the third largest river.
It's Rome,
Right.
the river of Rome.
Right.
The overflowing scourge.
That's great. I didn't think of that. That makes sense.
So what does that do?
We're just supposed to do that, right? 'Cause
I
the
don't know.
names correspond with their ministry.
Pompey 5.
Wise and foolish.
All right, I don't know, I'm getting lost in what we're doing. I see your hand, Daniel. Daniel was before you.
I was just wondering because in Xerxes the Great we have also a Sunday law, so I really see that really fits in this parallel, like Cyrus, Cambyses, Faustus Magnus, Darius, and then Xerxes the Great, which should parallel with
Alexander the Great.
And Xerxes the Great has the Sunday law also, and we know that we have a Sunday law.
World Sunday law.
World Sunday law. So I don't see a problem in the.
So who follows Xerxes the Great?
I don't know.
Artabanus and Artaxerxes. Tyler, then William.
I was gonna say is the way you have it on the board, and I know it's just because you're lining things up before. These don't line up with 1989, 9/11, Midnight Crash, Sunday Law. And I think that's going to be confusing.
These here don't line up with that.
It doesn't line
No,
up.
I wasn't trying to. That was
No, I know you're not
where
trying
we
to do that. I'm
started.
just saying, when people think number 4, they think those 4 waymarks, but these are abstract in a way, in the sense that they don't line up with
No,
those
but
waymarks.
But Brawin just pointed out that Pompey means 5, and Daniel says we have to include Ahasuerus to make 5.
Yeah.
So maybe these are 5 kings. Go ahead.
I don't know whether I'm drilling down a little bit too far, and I don't want to suggest that it has to be Trump that wins, but it's very interesting that Trump is saying no longer, the United States since the Second World War has gone out and built its empire free for other countries. It's put bases all over the world, it's funded its military expansion, and now he's saying, guess what? You're going to start paying for that, or we're out. Which means it's interesting that the progression towards US forcing the world to start doing things is being, to me anyway, seems to be being prefigured by starting to get all these other countries to start paying for US support.
Yeah, he sounds, the way he handles himself fits the scenario of the United States forcing the world to accept the Sunday law.
But that doesn't mean that
But
he has
Hillary
to
could
win
do it
for
too,
that
right?
to happen. Other whoever wins, if it's not him, it wouldn't be out of the question at all for Hillary or whoever it may be to copy what he said and adopt that.
Or be forced to do it just because of circumstances.
Yeah.
Tyler, Brawin?
I see the 4-3 of the trumpets and the seals represented here because after the Sunday law we have the 3, the 666, the dragon and the beast, the false prophet. We've recognized that before. The 7.
Recognized what?
That there's the true final threefold union that comes together at the Sunday law. That's the actual 3, the real 3. So that's a 4-3 combination that
So you're saying
prophetically.
the threefold union here is Xerxes the Great, Artabanus, and Artaxerxes.
I don't know if I'm necessarily saying that, but yeah.
I don't know.
Could the 5 mean that when whoever gets in this year's presidency, when they co-rule with the United Nations, could that make it up 5? That's what this.
The 5's down here.
5 is Clinton, so there must be something.
Okay.
What about the last, I don't know if I can say that, about the last president of the General Conference?
What about the last president of the General Conference?
I wonder if we can do presidents of the GC.
I don't know.
Okay, that's outside the scope of what we're looking at, but I get your point. You're saying, oh, we're applying it to the political leadership of the United States. Why aren't we applying it looking at the Adventist Church? Okay, I was going to go back and address some questions on 38 that weren't resolved from the day from last Wednesday that we never finalized, but we didn't get there. I don't know that this is finalized. Michael took off, but it seemed like at least he would argue that you don't have 4 successive. I think you have 4 successive that are marked, because he's coming to deal with him when he gets killed, and he takes the same position, and his position was to protect Cleopatra and her brother.
I think we choose these 4 because they are mentioned in Daniel 11. All the 4, right?
Yeah, that's the history
Yeah.
that the pioneers have said is understood in those. So,
But they specifically mentioned, or the actions. Of the
yeah, I'm seeing, but based on how we relate to prophecy, because the history that's mentioned in those verses describes these 4 characters, we wouldn't be threatened if there was 2 more characters that were Caesars between these 2, because that happens in the first 4 verses of Daniel 11. We've taken the position that we're only dealing with what's noted in the scripture of truth in this passage. So the pioneers say these 4 are the ones that are noted.
Sister White also says, the history of 11th chapter of Daniel is almost complete, and it will be repeated.
Much of the history that's taken place in fulfillment of this prophecy will be repeated. In the 30th verse. Any other comments? Thoughts? This is big stuff. It'd be nice to get this finalized. This is what does that do for the rest of Daniel 11? If this is true, what does this do?
All the rest of line 11 will repeat.
Yeah, you got to get back into verse 5 to verse 14 or 16, and you got to see what the Lord is saying about those histories with the struggle between the king of the south and the king of the north, and where to plug that in. It's probably repeat and enlarge. You have to know where to start it and end it. But this is like giving us the job assignment to figure that out. Why would that be divine poetry? You can't answer that because this is such an obscure thought that there's no way you would know. This movement began with a message of Daniel 11. Wouldn't it be poetic if that's where the whole picture came together, was back in Daniel 11? And it would be consistent with the Lord's dealing with men.
The end of Daniel 11 and the beginning of Daniel.
Yeah, the end of Daniel 11 was the beginning, and the beginning of Daniel 11 is the end.
Or, I'm just thinking about it now, does 40 to 45 even fit in it?
Does 40 to 45 fit in
I haven't
it?
thought about it at all, but does 40 to 45 fit in it? But because then you have...
It hasn't reached its first fulfillment though.
It hasn't.
No, I know.
What hasn't reached its first
Well, it
fulfillment?
hasn't come to the Sunday law.
Many of the
midnight
verses
cry.
haven't even.
Verse 40 is not even complete.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you can't reapply it before it even has
Yeah.
its first, can you?
I said it's parallel. That's the point we're looking at.
40 to 45 represents a fractal.
Yeah,
of
I'm
1
more
to-
thinking
1
fractal.
to 39, which is occurring again in 40 to 45.
What's occurring in 40 to 45 is occurring in verses 30 to 36.
Yeah, and also what occurred in 1 to 35 will occur again in 40 to 45 as a fractal of.
Yeah, but the way you're saying it makes it sound like 1 to 35 is one line.
No.
I'm sure there's more than one
Yeah,
line in that
absolutely.
those verses. That's our problem, is sorting out where to stop and start the line. Brother Theodore, you want to pray?
Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful to be here this morning. As we have opened up your word and allowed your Spirit to work upon our hearts and our minds, we just pray, Lord, that you can continue to lead and guide us, not just intellectually, but spiritually, that you can transform our characters. We ask, Lord, that you can be with us throughout this day, that you can order events in our lives of each person here, and that the events of the world that are happening, that you are also ordering, that we can be aware of them, and that we can be on the right side of the issue as we come to the end of this world's history. And we pray this in Jesus' name.